Hey, this is Mike with Motorrad Audio, and what this video is going to cover is the installation of our audio upgrade kits for the R1200RT series of motorcycles. So let's get started. So the tools that you're going to be needing for this installation would be one T25 Torx screwdriver, some variation of the T25 that is a shorter screwdriver, either a skew driver like we have here, or just something that's maybe not quite as long to get into a couple of the tight spots. You'll need a Phillips head screwdriver for dealing with the battery. You'll need a set of wire crimpers, wire strippers, and then if you're doing the 2-channel installation, you'll need some kind of heat gun, lighter, torch, whatever the case may be for doing the heat shrink on the ring terminal. And that's it. Okay, so first things first, we're going to pull this screw, and the top screws here, and the same 2 screws on the other side. Will make your life a little easier if you turn the key on and go ahead and raise your windshield up. That way you have a little better access to those top screws. So once you have those screws off, this will lift up just enough to give you a little wiggle room on each of these to be able to remove both of these grills and access the OEM speakers. Once those covers are off, there will be 3 screws holding the pod in on each side that you'll need to remove to get those out. Once you have all those screws out, the pods will come out this end first and come out to you a little bit, and you'll need to squeeze the tab on the plug right here to unplug the pod itself. So now that we have the pods out, we'll move on to the panels that you remove for getting the amplifier mounted. Okay, so you want to go ahead and remove the seat. So you can access the screw here later. First panel you want to remove is this one here. So there'll be 1 screw here and 1 screw right down here. Panel's going to pop right off, and set that aside with the screws that matched up to it. So now we're going to be removing this panel here. There's a couple pieces that just kind of snap in up there, and then a couple screws that are right directly underneath this lip here. Once you have those 2 out, this will simply pop off because there's just 2 other nubs here that go into these grommets there. Next panel to remove is going to be this one here. We're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 screws to remove here. All of those out. This panel will come off here, which also goes up to your air intake. This is an LED light that was previously on the bike, so we just have that moved out of the way. So now that we have this panel off, this is going to be the location of your amplifier mount. So you'll have a couple screws to take out for that. Be right here. And right here. So this piece here, once your amp is mounted on it, is going to tuck right up into there to mount your amplifier. Your wiring for the speaker wires that go to the front that feed the input and the output of the amplifier are going to go right up through here to get to your front pods. So you'll probably want to start running wires and things to the proper locations before mounting the amp, just to have a little bit more wiggle room in the overall scheme of things. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get our speaker wires routed to the amplifier and to the speaker locations. So you're going to have one path straight through there that goes right to where the amplifier is. You'll have your OEM plug that you'll want to tuck back here a little bit to make room for your pods. And then there is a wire channel that with a bunch of other wires bundled going across the top right underneath the bottom of the gauge cluster there. And then you'll have your other location that your other pod is going to go. So we'll get to routing those. What you're actually routing is this wire bundle here. You'll have a input plug and an output plug. So this will go to the new speaker. This will go to the original speaker plug. This little thing hanging off of it on each end is a resistor. That's something that's made to keep the factory system happy, so it sees a load that it's normally seeing with a speaker now that there's an amplifier. And then your other end will be these right here that are the input and output going down to the amplifier. So let's get to running those. So we'll go ahead and take our amplifier plugs, run those right down here through that cavity to get to where the amp is going to go. Plug in our speaker input plug, which is the white plug, right to the OEM plug, and tuck that down in there. And then bring this harness over to the other side for the other pod. We supplied some wire ties in the packaging with the amplifier and everything, so you'll go ahead and wire tie your speaker lead going to the other side right here with the factory bundle. We'll go ahead and plug in our plug here. Tuck those wires back in a little bit to get them out of the way of the pod that's going to be going in. And just clip off your wire ties. That's it. You're wired as far as the speaker pods go. It's very, very straightforward and simple. Okay, so now we have our input and output plugs right down here where the amplifier is going to be. And our next thing will be running the power and ground over to the battery itself. So removing the battery is going to be pulling down on these straps to release this. This portion here is going to lift up and come off to release the battery itself. You're going to be lifting the battery up and pulling that out a little bit, disconnecting the ground wire because that's going to keep the battery from coming the rest of the way out. Your power wire is up on the inside and has a pigtail that will allow the battery to pull out to be able to access it. We'll be putting our fuse holder in here and running our power wire up along inside of there to get to where the amplifier is going to be. So let's get started with that. Okay, for the routing of the power and ground wire, we suggest taping it to one of the long wire ties that we supplied. Just helps in fishing the wires through here. Go back behind the coolant intake and down between it and the little reservoir here. You want to pull it through to where this plug essentially rests about here. That's going to meet up with the other plug from the amplifier and be able to tuck away back there. So once you've got it fished down through there, there's a little bit of a tube that comes off the back of this reservoir. You want to go over the top of that and fish it around behind this other larger tube for the engine. Once you've got that, make sure you've got a little bit of slack that you can push back there and be able to have enough slack to wire tie these wires up so you don't have to worry about them falling down on you later. There will be some extra holes in the amp plate that goes in here that you can wire tie to, or you can wire tie to this bracket back there. So now that we have that wire run, there is going to be a sidebar for people that have the 4-channel amp package. If you're doing the 4-channel, you're going to be running your rear speaker wire along this same channel here and bringing that in from the back to the front instead of this way. You'll be going that way because the dual plugs that are on it are going to be more difficult for running this direction. So you'll run your amplifier end of that cable up through that same route, and we'll cover the under the seat stuff here in a little bit for the 4-channel versions. And now that we have that stuff run, we'll go ahead and mount our amplifier just to make sure all the wiring reaches everywhere it's supposed to and everything mounts up here, and then we'll finish things at the battery and at the speakers themselves. Okay, so when it comes to mounting your amplifier on the supplied bracket, you're going to have different holes based on whether you got the 4-channel amp version or the 2-channel amp version. If you did any of our 1.5 or 2.5 kits, you'll have a 4-channel with extra wiring to run to potential future speakers, or if you did a stage 3 or 4, it's going to come with a 4-channel. The stage 1 and 2 are going to come with the 2-channel. So if you're doing the 4-channel, there is one slight difference to that. When you have this bracket here, there's this little tab that you're going to hook the amplifier kind of behind. So when it's mounted, you have your tab on top of this here, and then you'll have 3 nuts and bolts that'll go in there to lock this into place. The 4th bolt down here is going to be up against something, so actually this tab helps to kind of tweak the amplifier back ever so slightly so it fits better behind that front fairing. If you're doing the 2-channel amplifier, it'll be pretty straightforward, but you're going to be mounting it at the far end down here, and you'll have holes here for all 4 nuts and bolts to go on there, and then these tabs are going to bolt into your factory locations on the bike. Another thing to mention is the amplifiers are pre-sealed and pre-tuned for the particular package that you purchased, so there's no need for any adjustments to be made to the amplifier after it's been mounted. Okay, so this particular one is getting our 2-channel amplifier. So we're going to tuck this bracket right back behind here to that spot that we pulled the bolts out of earlier, and then tuck the tab here back behind the OEM to get to that clip. So once you have those 2 lined up, go ahead and reinstall your screw. hold the amplifier in place. So on the 4-channel amplifier, it comes back a little bit farther. It's very, very close to the trim that goes on here. So we do include a little piece of gasket foam, whatever you want to call it, right here to keep the amplifier from chafing up against the plastic, so you don't worry about it scarring the amplifier, that kind of thing. You'll bring your input harness for the amp above here. Really straightforward on this end. Plug in the white to the white or clear. You have your output plug from the amplifier that will circle around and plug into the black. You'll tuck these up here and wire tie them in place as well. And then you have your power harness here to plug in. Now, we did include dielectric grease in the packages, so we do suggest squirting a little bit of that into this connector before plugging in, and this connector, actually all 3 of these, just to cut down on corrosion, that sort of thing long term. There is a fuse in line with the amplifier here. The fuse that's at the battery is made to protect the actual wire, so there's no damage done to the bike should that short out somehow. If you ever had an issue with the amplifier where it wasn't working and the fuse was fine at the battery, there is the additional fuse here to check as well. But these wires will tuck up in here and wire tie away as well. And now your amplifier is in there and ready to go. And we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so now that we have our power and our ground run down through here, we're going to go ahead and strip back our ground and put the ring connector on it. On the 10 gauge variation with the yellow ring connectors, they are a heat shrink ring connector, so you can crimp that down and then take a lighter, torch, heat gun, whatever the case may be that you have, and go ahead and shrink this down to seal it up. Careful, because it will get quite hot and you give it a little bit of time to cool down. So while that is cooling down, we'll go ahead and pull our battery out. You want to lift up a little bit and slide that out towards you. Take the ground loose so you can pull the battery farther out to get at the power wire. Once here, same thing, just remove that screw. Power wire will drop back down into the hole. Don't worry, it doesn't go too far. It's not something you can lose down in there. So now grab your supplied fuse holder that has the power terminal on it there. Bring your power lead back out. Run the screw down through that, then through ours, and drop it back down in there. Once you have that good and snug, just route your power wire this way. It will slide right back up in there. There is just enough room for that to go along in without being pinched or anything else. Leave it hanging out just a little bit so you can get at your ground wire to be able to reinstall that. Got that tightened down. Slide this back in. You've got your fuse holder hanging out here for its other connection. You can go ahead and put the plastic tray back on the battery. And reattach your strap to hold everything in place. So now you can wire tie your ground and everything up here tucked out of the way, and go ahead and finish off the fuse holder. So for the fuse holder, you'll pull this grommet down and out of the way a little bit, pop the cap, and keep in mind it is connected to power, so you don't want to drop this down and let it touch metal or something, but it's pretty easy to keep safe. Tuck your wire through that hole there. Strip it back a good 1/2 inch or so. Grab your Allen wrench. Oops, wrong one. Open up the hole for this to go in. Give the wire a twist. Snug that portion of it up a little bit. Tuck it in here. You'll hear a little spark as the amplifier charges up the capacitors that are inside of it. That'll just be a quick little thing, no big deal. Tighten down on that. Pop your cover back on. Put your grommet back into position to seal that fuse holder up. And you can tuck your fuse holder right up in here and wire tie it off to the pole that's right up here above it to hold it in position there. And go ahead and neaten up the rest of your wires, wire tying them along through here as well, so you can go ahead and disassemble everything with no problem. Next step, we'll get the speaker pods in and we'll be done. Okay, with your 5 1/4 inch pod, just grab your black plug that was left over, plug that into your pod. You have to make sure those plugs are tucked way back in there as you do this, or they will definitely interfere with the pod going into place. Drop that bottom edge in and drop your pod in. Same thing on the other side. Plug into that leftover plug. Tuck those wires back in as you drop that front corner in. And in you go. Replace your 3 bolts back in that hold those speaker pods. Turn on everything, make sure everything is good to go, and reassemble. For those of you running the 4-channel amplifier, you're going to have an additional rear speaker harness that has the end that goes to the amplifier here and the end that goes to your right and left speaker plugs that are going on the top case. So it's going to be pretty obvious on how to run this. You are going to have to run this end towards the amplifier along here, just because trying to pull these through all the holes would be quite a pain. So you'll have your leads tucked up into here to actually get to where our plugs will come in with the factory plug that is on the top case. And then you'll simply run them along the wire channels. This has a lot of aftermarket accessories on it, so there's a lot of extra wires in here. But you'll just run it along this bundle here, all the way up to where you get to your battery, and then you'll continue on the same path that you used for the amplifier power and ground wires. So it is fairly straightforward.